You know, in the world of modern gaming, launch day isn't the finish line. It's barely the starting pistol. Real success, the kind that lasts, is a living, breathing service. But how do you actually measure its health? How do you know if it's thriving? Well, today, we're going to unlock the data-driven framework that really separates the legends from the games that just fade away.
It's the big question, isn't it? It's what every developer and every publisher is trying to figure out. Why is it that a game like Fortnite can keep its momentum for years and years, while so many others that have these huge, promising launches just vanish after a few months? Let me tell you, the answer isn't luck. It's all in the data. And that data points to a powerful framework of 5 interconnected pillars. Now, for any games as a service, what we call a GaaS title, these aren't just items on a checklist. No, they form a powerful system where the strength of one pillar directly impacts and reinforces all the others. Now, this might look a little complex at first glance, but what you're seeing is the engine, the very engine that drives every single successful live service game out there. We call it the GaaS flywheel, and it perfectly maps how every part of a player's journey connects to the next. So today, we're going to build this engine together, from the ground up, starting with the single most important piece.
And that brings us to our first pillar, retention. Now, this is the absolute bedrock of the entire system, and I really can't overstate this. If your players don't come back, nothing else matters. Not your marketing budget, not your monetization strategy, everything begins right here.
There's a reason our source material calls retention a crystal ball. It's because it genuinely predicts future success by answering one simple fundamental question. Is your game valuable enough to make players want to return? So let's dig into how we actually measure that value.
It all starts on day one, what we call D1 retention. Think of this as the purest, most honest measure of your first-time user experience. In other words, was it fun right out of the box? Did the player get it? Did they understand what they were supposed to do? A low D1 score is a massive red flag that there's something wrong with your core gameplay loop, and you've got to fix it fast.
So if they come back, we then look at D7. A player who returns after a whole week, well, they've moved past that initial ooh, shiny phase. They're now starting to engage with your deeper systems, your progression, the in-game economy, those midterm goals you've set up. You see, a big drop-off from D1 to D7, that's the classic sign of a game that's fun for an hour, but just doesn't have the depth to keep someone's attention. And that brings us to the big one, D30. Day 30 retention is the holy grail. It's the ultimate signal that your game has become more than just a game. It's become a hobby. And that level of stickiness, it's almost always driven by deep social connections, guilds, clans, co-op missions, things that build a real community and give people a powerful reason to stay. But let's get real for a second and look at the harsh reality this data shows us. That old benchmark, the 40-20-10 rule for D1, D7, and D30 retention, it's basically a fantasy now. In today's incredibly crowded market, the average D30 retention has crashed to below 3%. That just goes to show you how monumentally difficult the challenge of building that long-term stickiness has become.
Okay, so you've earned a player's returned. They're sticking around. But how do you deepen that relationship? How do you make it meaningful? Well, that brings us to Pillar 2, engagement. And this isn't just about if they're playing, but how they're playing, the intensity, the quality of their time spent in your world.
And the absolute best tool we have to understand this is something called the power user curve. Instead of just looking at something simple like how long a session is, this chart gives us this beautiful panoramic view of player habits over an entire month. It maps out exactly how many days they were active. Now, in a really healthy game, this curve often forms a smile. You'll have a big group of casual users on the left, playing a few days a month, and then you'll have your deeply invested power users on the far right, the ones who are practically living in your game. The entire goal of your live ops team, the folks managing the day-to-day of the game, is to gently nudge players from that casual side over towards the power user side, shifting that whole curve to the right. So, how do you actually do that? Well, you start by turning those casual players into more regular visitors. You do it with low-friction engagement hooks, things like daily login rewards, special weekly events you just can't miss. You're creating simple, compelling reasons for them to come back today. And this brings us to a really crucial point. If you have a solid base of players who are retained and who are highly engaged, well, monetization becomes the logical, natural outcome of their loyalty. It's not something you have to chase at their expense. And that is Pillar 3.
Now, when you're analyzing a game's monetization, you often see two common but dangerous imbalances. On one side, you have the minnow economy, where you get lots of little purchases, but you're failing to capture those high-value spenders. And on the other, you have the whale economy, which is even riskier because your entire business becomes dangerously reliant on a handful of very big spenders. A truly healthy game finds that sweet spot right in the middle.
But to really master monetization, you have to get inside the player's head. You have to understand the why behind the purchase. Is a player buying for competence, trying to get an edge to finally beat that boss that's been driving them crazy? Or is it relatedness, buying that rare cosmetic to show off their identity, to prove they were there for a special event? Or maybe it's loss aversion, that powerful FOMO, the fear of missing out on a limited-time deal. Or is it the thrill of the variable reward, like a loot box? The smartest studios in the world actually tag every single item they sell with its core psychological driver.
And all of this brings us to Pillar 4, growth. This is where all the other pillars, retention, engagement, monetization, all come together to solve what we call the golden equation of sustainable, profitable growth.
You see, all that work is synthesized into one single North Star metric, lifetime value, or LTV. And this isn't just some number on a spreadsheet. It is the total predicted value of a single player, combining how long they stay, how deeply they engage, and how much they choose to spend.
The entire multi-billion-dollar games-as-a-service industry, it all boils down to this one simple, non-negotiable equation. Your lifetime value, your LTV, must be greater than your customer acquisition cost, or CAC. Put simply, you have to make more money from a player than it costs you to get them to install the game in the first place.
And this is the part that is so crucial to understand. LTV isn't just a report card on how you're doing. It is a competitive weapon. In a cutthroat market, the studio with the highest LTV can afford to outspend everybody else on user acquisition. They can literally buy up all the growth while starving their competitors of new players. So let's bring it all home. When you manage these pillars correctly, they don't just add up, they multiply. They create this beautiful, self-reinforcing, virtuous cycle, the GaaS flywheel. Here's exactly how that flywheel starts to spin. You use your profits for growth to acquire new users. A relentless focus on retention turns them into a stable base of players. Strong engagement forges them into a loyal community. This leads to healthy monetization, which in turn generates a really high LTV. And that profit, well, it gets reinvested right back into acquiring even more users, and the whole cycle just spins faster and stronger.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important lesson of all. The single greatest mistake a studio can make is to break this flywheel by chasing short-term monetization at the expense of long-term retention. Sure, aggressive pay-to-win mechanics might give you a revenue spike this quarter, but they will absolutely destroy player trust and collapse your LTV tomorrow. It's a deal with the devil.
Because in the end, that's what all of this is about. These analytics, these pillars, they're not just numbers. They tell a story. They tell the collective story of every single player's journey through your world. And so the only question left is the one you have to ask yourself. Are you telling a story that people will want to be a part of for years to come?